Hey, what's going on, archers? Welcome back to another episode of the Parable Arrows video podcast. I'm Josh, and today I am joined by Rafiq Nabali, who is a documentary filmmaker, videographer, and a talented creator of movie Devotional Mondays, which he shares on his Instagram page. He's a talented guy, and so we'll have his count take so you can check him out in our description. But we're joined by him today to just kind of dive into faith, Christianity, movies, and how all those things intersect. So, Rafiq, to get started, I want to pick your brain a little bit because I got a really cool sneak peek in your documentary, which thanks for sharing that. And I said before we started that as I was watching, I was really inspired by you talking about your grandma and her connection to the faith and you being able to see her example as you were growing up and how that kind of inspired your faith journey. What I would be curious to hear is, when did you feel God putting a calling on your life to discern that you were supposed to go into filmmaking and kind of pursue this outlet of visual storytelling?
Yeah. That's a great question, man. Yeah, I don't know if there was a specific time, but I can come up with one. So I know as a really young kid, I was always into storytelling, but I didn't realize it at first. So I remember as a kid going through my house, finding like loose change wherever I could underneath the couch or whatever, running to the corner store. And they used to have those dispensers where you can put like a quarter in and you can get in like some type of action figure or some type of teddy bear or something. I'd go back home with that. And I just create these elaborate backstories for these characters. Like, this guy is from this planet and his whole purpose is to like conquer the world and do this, that, and the third. But I realized over time that for me, having each, like, I guess, toy having its own story was integral to my play. Like, I couldn't just play with them without understanding who they were as, people. And so I feel like that was like the beginning of like my storytelling bug, if you will. In high school, I tried to take every film class that I could. They didn't have a lot, but I do remember watching Memento by Christopher Nolan.
I have no short-term memory. Since my injury, I can't make new memories. Everything fades. If we talk for too long, I'll forget how we started. And next time I see you, I'm not going to remember this conversation. I don't even know if I've met you before. I've told you this before, haven't I?
And high school, and that was the first time I realized, like, a movie could really make you think. Because we were supposed to write a paper on it anyway, but I spent days just thinking about that whole concept of like who we are being connected to our memory and what we can remember and all those different things. And so I felt like those were two key moments. And then when I was 18, I moved to South Florida to live with my aunt for a while. And I spent a lot of time, at that point, I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker. I was actually in Florida because I wanted to start with community college and I was going to transfer to Florida State University. But I spent a lot of time watching a bunch of Christian movies, like just about anything that was out there, anything that you could find on television, anything you could find online, I would watch it. And unfortunately, some of them weren't pretty good. And it's hard to go from like Christopher Nolan to like some of these like lower end budget Christian films. And I mean, besides like The Passion of the Christ and, things like that, that were at that level, I kind of felt like, man, I really want to get into this field so that I can create films that look just as good as anything Christopher Nolan would make, just as deep, just as thought-provoking, but also ultimately point people to Christ. And so I feel like that was that season when I got inspired to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we'll actually kind of start getting into some of the questions that I sent you, and you're actually kind of transitioning into one. So we'll move in that direction. So something, just kind of sharing on my experience with art and creativity, especially when it comes to faith, something that I wrestle with as a believer, and I know you can see behind me, my wall is full of pop culture stuff. And I've got my C.S. Lewis, I got my apologetics, theology, all that. But a lot of the things that, are the kinds of content that influenced me and inspired me, like watching Digimon when I was growing up as a kid, or like, video games. Like I've got this little figure from one of my favorite games of all time called The World Ends With You that is like, it's like the pinnacle of my style, like the vibe and everything. And the Christian stuff that we were given, yes, it like had heart and there was good intention behind it, but there was this lack from the art and the creative side, if that makes sense. And so I'm curious to hear from your perspective, because you're not just a consumer, you're a creator, having made your documentary, and now you're more ingrained in the creation space. So what do you think is the cause of us in Christian culture maybe having some of that content predominantly be less artful and creative? Like why aren't we as Christians getting the church version of Memento, if that makes sense? Like I'm thinking of like, I don't know, like there's that film Beckman. I don't know if you heard of it. I haven't watched it, but I've seen videos on it, and it's like a side by side of that and John Wick, and people comparing it and the quality issues.
The thing that bugs me the most about this scene is that it really lacks any of the dramatic impact that it believes it has. From the way it's shot and the way it's cut together and the musical stings, it really feels like the creators want us to feel the weight of this decision. But if you compare it to its contemporary, or rather the movie it's shamelessly mimicking, John Wick, after managing to escape a life of violence, John literally buried the tokens of his past beneath concrete and has to, once prompted, use a sledgehammer to get through it. It's an aggressive physical display of not only his wrath, but a clear-cut demonstration of the weight of the decision he is making. He really did not want to have to do this, and this adds impact to the entire movie. John Wick sweating, furiously pounding metal against the hard ground to forcibly rip a hole in the earth and awaken the demons of his past, versus David A.R. White angrily flipping open his outdated phone and firmly pressing a single button.
So why do you think it is that there's maybe heart in our Christian films, but there isn't a lot of like artistic, excellence maybe?
I think it's several different things. I think part of it is budget. Although I wouldn't blame it all on budget, because I've seen some of the budgets to some of these Christian films and I'm like, wow, okay, we could have did a lot more. But some of it is budget. Some of it, from what I've heard, a lot of Christian films are kind of created like outside of like churches, in the sense of it's the pastor or someone from the church who has an idea for a film, and the church kind of rallies together in order to make this film possible, which is, I think, totally fine. But what the issue typically happens in the approach to Christian films is it's all about the message.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
it's okay for it to be all about the message, but I think the way they go about it, it's almost like the messaging is ingrained in every single scene. And so there's no room for actual storytelling to bring your audience from point A to point B, to have different moments of success and failure and understanding the human like psyche, like the way that we interact with each other. 9 times out of 10, we don't actually say what it is that we mean. Understanding dialogue and how people argue, and like all these little nuances that I was able to learn in film school that makes visual storytelling so special. I think a lot of times Christian filmmakers don't necessarily have that training. If they do have that training, they don't necessarily have the budget to execute it well. I will say that there's a lot of great Christian films Christian filmmakers that are on the rise. I mean, you think about stuff like The Chosen and some of the Christian films that have been coming out lately that like raising the bar. I kind of feel like we're headed towards, if we're not already in a renaissance of Christian art just being so much better than it was in times past. But yeah, I think partially it's just due to that lack of understanding the art form and understanding the strongest way to convey a message to an audience is to tell a story. And so when you bring me through this entire journey of the hills and downs of somebody's life, and then land on this one central idea that you've been waiting to share with me from the get-go, I'm going to receive it so much better because that story is now ingrained in my mind, you know?